This episode is brought to you by Chevy Silverado. When it's time for you to ditch the blacktop and head off-road, do it in a truck that says no to nothing. The Chevy Silverado Trail Boss. Get the rugged capability of its Z71 suspension and 2-inch factory lift. Plus, impressive torque and towing capacity thanks to an available Duramax 3-liter turbo diesel engine. Where other trucks call it quits, you'll just be getting started. Visit Chevy.com to learn more.
At Sierra, discover great deals on top brand workout gear, like high-quality walking shoes, which might lead to another discovery.
40,000 steps, baby. Who's on top now, Karen?
You've taken the office step challenge a step too far. Don't worry, though. Sierra also has yoga gear. It might be a good place to find your zen. Discover top brands at unexpectedly low prices. Sierra, let's get moving.
What's going on, Eagles fans? Thanks for tuning in for another episode of the No Huddle Show, our Philadelphia Eagles podcast for NJ.com. This is Cayden Steele, and joining me as always will be my co-host Bob Brookover. We got a good one in store for you today. We're going to break down every single draft pick made by the Philadelphia Eagles from Thursday through Saturday, starting with Jahad Campbell, the star linebacker from Alabama, all the way to the 6th round with their final pick in Virginia Tech defensive end, Antwan Powell-Ryland. Let's get started. But first, this episode is brought to you by Penco Tech. With 2 convenient campuses in Blackwood, New Jersey, and in Bristol, Pennsylvania, Penco Tech has provided comprehensive hands-on career training for more than 50 years. Featuring programs in HVAC, electrical, plumbing, automotive technology, and more. With dedicated instructors and career placement assistants, Penco Tech can give you the skills and confidence to build a brighter future. Financial aid is available to those who qualify. Learn more and take the first step by going to pencotech.edu. Bob, let's get right into it. The Philadelphia Eagles made 10 draft picks this week, starting with the first round, Alabama linebacker Jahad Campbell. Nobody really expected him to be there. Top 15 pick from, consensus boards. Howie Roseman said the Eagles had a top 10 grade on him, but they're going to add him to this defense. Bob, what's your original thoughts on a guy like Jahad Campbell joining Vic Fangio's defense? How do you see him fitting in? And what's your overall thoughts on the pick?
Yeah, well, I mean, it was kind of like a year ago where, nobody thought Quinyon Mitchell would fall to 22. And then a bunch of quarterbacks got drafted, and suddenly the Eagles Howie didn't have to do anything except wait for him to fall into his lap. Got him, and he got the number 2 defensive rookie of the year. Incredible pick. If he's half as good as Quinyon Mitchell was as a rookie, the Eagles just struck gold again. The thing now we're going to see is, the big debate that's been on, is he going to be an edge rusher? Is he going to be a linebacker? And the only person who has that answer is Vic Fangio. My guess is he's going to be a little bit of both. He had a great last season at Alabama. Before that, he hadn't really found his mark yet after starting as an edge rusher there. But he's a special talent. He's a local kid. He's obviously a very motivated guy. He finished his high school career after starting at Timber Creek in Gloucester Township. He finished his career at IMG, which is where professional athletes go to be pros before they're pros, and then played at Alabama. It will be fascinating to see where Vic starts him. The Eagles have some questions because of Nakobe Dean, his knee, so probably starts at off-ball linebacker in the beginning until Nakobe gets healthy. Maybe he never leaves there if he plays incredibly well. But I do think we're going to see him line up, certainly, and he did this even at Alabama last year. At times lined up on the left side as an edge rusher, on either side as an edge rusher. He's a special athlete, and the Eagles, got great value in the first round, despite having had the 32nd pick, ended up being the 31st pick. Yeah, it was a great start to the draft for the Eagles.
Yeah, nobody expected him to be in that range, and he shouldn't have been, honestly. Maybe he fell because of the torn labrum that he suffered in the bowl game against Michigan. He had surgery in March, but I'm not really sure that should have prevented teams from, from drafting him inside the top 20. Maybe it's because people still devalued the linebacker position in the NFL. Most teams do, at least. I mean, the Eagles did for a while until they paid Zach Bond this offseason, but you're seeing a philosophy change, and he has drawn some comparisons to Zach Bond. I'm not sure if he'll play the same exact role, but he's got the ability to rush the quarterback, the ability to drop in coverage. He has sideline to sideline speed. Uh, his closing speed to me is really impressive. The way he chases down ball carriers from the backside, the way he closes in on quarterbacks when he gets his sacks. I think he plays violent, which you saw in 2023 when he knocked Jackson Dart's helmet off against Ole Miss. Now Jackson Dart is the quarterback for the New York Giants, their first round pick. So maybe we'll see that again with Jahad Campbell. But he's a really good football player. I don't have many concerns at all, and I do think it was good that Howie Roseman said he didn't want to put him in a box of being this, off-ball linebacker necessarily, which makes you think they see him, as this versatile weapon. Maybe this outside linebacker type, like an Andrew Van Ginkel, but with more upside. My only worry would be like if they decided to pull him at full-time edge, because he's 6'3", and he I believe he's only 235, which is a little small for that position, and I don't know if I see him becoming that Micah Parsons type player, but some hybrid version of an outside linebacker or edge rusher type. I think Jahad Campbell could really flourish in the NFL. Bob, do you think there's any chance because the edge rush room? I mean, that's the one position they really didn't get a traditional type edge player. Do you think that's where he's primarily going to play though? Is the edge?
I don't think to start because uh, because of the N'Kobe Dean situation. Although that they did draft another Georgia kid who was a linebacker in Smile Mondon,
Mm-hmm.
and then they drafted in the final round. They also drafted an edge rusher who's in Antoine Power Island, who's more of a conventional edge rusher. Led the nation in. We'll get to him in a minute, but led the nation in sacks. Um, I do think we're going to see him at edge rusher some. Yeah, I do. I don't know how much. You make a good point about his size. His size is similar. He's a little bigger. He's stronger and he's faster than Zach Bond. It took the Saints 4 years to figure out that they didn't figure out that they had a great off the ball linebacker, and that's why he ended up with the Eagles, because the Saints never figured it out. But the Eagles have a bigger, stronger, faster version of Zach Bond now. Now the question is, Zach Bond football IQ proved to be so high last year. I'm sure Jahad Campbell has a strong IQ, but I don't, off the charts it was for Zach Bond last year. So that's what he's got to prove. He's got to prove his football instincts are as good as Zach Bond's. I mean, that's what made Zach so great last year, was he wasn't just making tackles. He was a playmaker who got the ball back for the Eagles, just was such an impact player. So it's going to be fascinating to see what Campbell turns into.
It's interesting that you say that, because the knock on him from scouting reports is that, at least from some, is that instinctually they weren't saying he was a bad instinctual player, but still an area of his game that's getting developed, which makes some sense because he went to Alabama as an edge rusher. So
right.
He's still relatively new to linebacker.
Right. There's a big difference between being an edge rusher and being a linebacker. You got a lot more responsibilities when you're an off the ball linebacker than you do as an edge rusher.
Yes, and if that is still of an area of his game that is developing, maybe you want to use him kind of all over the place and take advantage of his athleticism. Don't pigeonhole him into one role. don't put him in this box. So I think Howie Roseman said a bunch of good things, and I think Jahad Campbell is going to make a huge impact. He talked about comparing himself to Zach Bond, Fred Warner, and Micah Parsons. If he becomes either of those players, the Eagles hit a home run. And they also might have hit a home run in the second round as well, getting Andrew Makuba, the safety from Texas, to replace CJ Gardner potentially and to at least compete with Sidney Brown for their starting job. Andrew Makuba had a wide range of grades from second round, third round, fourth round, fifth round. Bob, what's your opinion on this guy from Texas that's coming in here to help the secondary?
Well, we'll start with some trivia. He's the third player ever born in Zimbabwe to make it to the NFL. Can you name the other two?
I would fail so bad it's not even funny. If you gave me a hint, and if this player was a modern NFL player, I think I would have a shot. But if this is past 2005 or before 2005, I don't know if I would have a shot.
One of them has played the last 3 years in the league. Started 14 games for the Falcons in 23 and 9 last year. He is a linebacker. It's a little trick one for him because I think he was just born in Zimbabwe. I don't think he's a native Zimbabwean. Is Nathan Landman from the Falcons, and the other one, I got to say
Nathan. Wow, I was not going to guess that.
And the other one was a 5th round pick of the Falcons. The Falcons have a monopoly on Zimbabwe players in 2013. And he was in the league for 3 years, finished his career with the Giants, a defensive end, Stanley Mapanga.
Wow.
He's no longer in the league. But we start with a little trivia. We move on to what the player is. Exciting safety who's going to more than likely be in a competition for the job vacated by C.J. Gardner-Johnson as the strong safety. It will be a great competition. Yeah, the NFL wants to be an international league. Well, they got a great international competition between two guys with two great stories. Sidney Brown grew up very poor in Canada. Moved back and forth. Went to the University of Illinois. At times was homeless. The single mom, great story with him and his twin brother from the Bengals, the running back from the Bengals. And like Sidney, Drew Lukamba grew up very poor in Zimbabwe before his family moved here. When he was 8, moved to Austin. He started his career. Lukamba started his career at Clemson. Didn't really, kind of underachieved there. Had a good first year and then kind of underachieved. Got back home to Austin last year and had by far his best season with 5 interceptions, 4 tackles for loss. He really became the player that everybody thought he would be. He's got position flexibility. Can also, I believe, play some slot cornerback and did that in college. So we'll see what he becomes. Most people think he's going to win this competition, but I would not count Sidney Brown out of the competition. A very determined player who has the advantage of having been in the league and know what the Eagles' culture is for the last 2 years. So I can't wait to watch that battle.
It's going to be fun. Andrew Makuba's story is incredible, Bob. You covered it all, perfectly. Also, his background has helped him, as a football player. I was reading in The Athletic when they wrote an article back on him. I believe when he was a freshman or a sophomore at Clemson, it was a really good piece. But when he was, a little kid in Zimbabwe, he played soccer, and you could see that when you watch him play. When you watch his tape, his foot speed is incredible. And Howie Roseman, talked about they need a guy at that position who could cover tight ends, who could cover slot corners. They need a guy that can run. Nowadays you can't have these these big safeties who are hard hitters but can't move as well. And when they first made this pick, and I'm not saying this guy can't do that, but at first I for the Eagles, I thought Kevin Winston would be a really good fit, and I thought, Kevin Winston's a better player than Andrew Makuba, and he might be in some regards, and I really like Kevin Winston, but Andrew Makuba is a really fantastic athlete. Ran a 4.55 at the combine. He just moves extremely well, so he kind of fits more what they were looking for. So from a scheme fit in Vic Fangio's defense, I completely understand it. The ball production, 5 interceptions last year at Texas. They're looking to replace C.J. Gardner-Johnson's production, which is not easy because he had 6 interceptions in 2024. He has 6 interceptions in 2022. Like C.J. Gardner-Johnson is one of the best ball hawks in football, but maybe Andrew Makuba can bring a little bit of that element as well. But I like the pick. He's had a ton of success early on at Clemson. I went through an up and down period, but then finished off really strong. He is undersized, at 5'11", 186, so he's going to have to get bigger. But yeah, but it's going to be a heck of a competition there. It improves the safety depth. Also, the Eagles improved the depth of this defense in so many different positions, starting round 4 as well with the defensive line room. We know Jahai Campbell might be an edge rusher, but this next guy is going to beef up the interior. Ty Robinson, Nebraska. What's your thoughts on the big fella?
They didn't just improve their defensive depth on the defensive line, which needed to be improved after Milton Williams left. Obviously, a big loss there. They improved their depth at fullback.
Yeah,
this is a guy who played some fullback in Nebraska. To me, the most incredible measurable on him is he ran a 4.88 40 at the combine. He weighs 288 pounds. That's linebacker numbers to be running a 40 at that size. His stat, I think he gave his own stat. I don't know where I could look it up, but so I didn't. So I just went with, according to Ty Robinson, he lined up as a fullback 8 times in goal line last year, and they scored touchdowns on 7 of those plays. So and with the tush push going out, that's an important stat, I think. Possibly going out, I guess. But him and Ben Van Zumeren gives the Eagles 2 options there at fullback. Van Zumeren's going to have his work cut out for him to make this team, although his special teams prowess does help. But anyway, back to Ty Robinson as a defensive tackle. Just a really good athlete who spent a long time in college. He went 6 years. And we're getting to the end of those kids right now who were impacted by COVID. But this guy's a really intelligent guy. He's a pre-med major. He said one of the reasons he thought so he had five career sacks before last season and ended up with 7. And he had 14 tackles for loss and ended up with 13 last year. Now there's 2 things there. That much experience. If you've been a starting player, you should really get better at that point. But one thing he said that helped him, and I found this very interesting, was his pre-med work. Much of his pre-med work was done by his last season in Nebraska, and that helped him concentrate more on football. Obviously, now his whole life is going to be concentrated on football, and the doctor thing is going to be put on hold for a while here. So he obviously smart, athletic. I really like the pick a lot.
Bobby covered it really well. This guy tore up the combine. You mentioned the 40-yard dash, but he also had the 2nd best broad jump, the 4th best vertical jump. He's an athlete. I mean, he's, for a guy that size, 6'5", 288, he shouldn't move the way he does. Nebraska took advantage of that athleticism by lining him up at fullback, like you mentioned, but also on defense, he would kick out to the edge, and he was a really strong run defender there. Did a good job of containing things, and then they would kick him back inside for the majority of his plays, where he was a disruptive pass rusher last season. 7 sacks. It was a little bit of a late breakout, and I guess you could say that might be a concern. Why didn't this guy be as productive early in his career? But because of the athleticism, because of the recent production, I get why they took this swing. If I'm going to be a little more negative, he has short arms, and he's kind of a tweener. Like 288 isn't your traditional nose tackle. I think his body type is kind of weird, but he's a really, really good athlete. And if you're looking for versatility, which it seems like that is one of the themes of this draft, we mentioned Makuba, safety and nickel, and Jahad Campbell, off-ball linebacker and edge. Ty Robinson, edge setter, defensive tackle, and fullback. He could do a lot of different things. I don't know how much fullback he'll play, but it'll be interesting. But I could see him having, a big role, maybe replacing more Joma's snap count from last year. Maybe a little bit less, but I could see him playing, 20, 30% of the defensive snaps, rotational defensive lineman who could do a little bit of everything. Overall, I like the player. I think there are some concerns, but I get why they bet on the athleticism. The next guy, though, Bob, I'm not sure if he's going to have the same impact that, maybe Jahad Campbell, Makuba, and Robinson will have on defense next year, at least. Maybe he will. Maybe he'll come out and he'll surprise me. But another older prospect who had a long career as well, Mac McWilliams, the cornerback from Central Florida.
Yeah, he's another kid who, and you get a lot of these in the NIL era of football. He started his career, played 4 years at UAB. He, to his credit, he also had his best season in his final college season, transferring to UCF. Can play the slot. He's a fifth round pick. Fifth round picks aren't generally supposed to be guys that come in and crack your lineup. And he's probably not, he's probably going to have to play some special teams. He's going to have a learning curve. But that's what you're getting in fifth round guys typically. So, I'd be shocked if we saw him on the field too much in 2025.
It would be a shock. The good thing that he has going for him is that he did run a 4.41 at the combine. You can see that speed when you watch him play as well. Watch him a little bit earlier in the pre-draft process. You think Keely Ringo, because he's going to become the full-time starter on the outside most likely, he's not going to be playing as much special teams next year, and Keely Ringo was a great gunner. You can make an argument he was a Pro Bowl special teams worthy player last year. And if they're going to take him off that unit, they need a guy that can go down and make plays on special teams. Mac McWilliams is a candidate to do that. I like the versatility of being able to play on the outside. And in the nickel, more likely he's going to be a nickel because, at 5'10", 191 pounds, and having less than 30-inch arms, that usually is like a disqualifier for playing outside. But at least maybe he could do it in a pinch. Another thing that I thought was interesting, he wasn't a captain at Central Florida, but he was at UAB before he in 2023. Wouldn't be surprised if he's one of these Red Star guys. The Eagles really like leadership qualities. Obviously, UAB thought he was a good leader to make him a team captain. I think this is a solid depth pick for the Eagles. Not sure what the upside is. And because of the age and because of him not really having a role as well. But, Bob, I know you like this guy. We sat there yesterday. At the end of the day, you brought him up to me as your favorite guy. Smile Munden, going back to the Georgia well. Why do you like this guy so much, the linebacker, their second, fifth-round pick?
I think, after Campbell, this might be the guy who they got the best value for. Dean Brugler, who I got to credit, I don't think anybody does a better pre-draft breakdown than Dane Brugler from the Athletic. He had him ranked as the fifth best linebacker in college football. Had him going in the third, possibly the third, even the fourth round. The Eagles get him in the fifth, late in the fifth. At that, and I guess that's more mid-round than late, but it just he's a guy who I was fascinated by. A, I love the name. B, I love that he played with. He started his career with Nakobe Dean at Georgia. Now he's going to compete against Nakobe Dean for snaps in the NFL. He just, he looks like a player to me, based on what he did at Georgia. I mean, this guy was a 3-year starter. Um, he basically replaced N'Kobe as the linebacker there. 3-year starter and a playmaker. He had 6 sacks the last 2 seasons. Uh, I just think this guy's got a chance to come here, and I don't know if it's going to happen right away. To me, that again, interesting. Did they draft him maybe to have to play for N'Kobe early on, or there's so much to find out there with Campbell, or is Campbell the guy they want to put there? It was just a fascinating pick when you already have Campbell on the roster to to pick this guy. So I can't wait to see him get on the field, see what they do with him, see his interaction with N'Kobe. N'Kobe's one of my favorite players in the locker room. I think he's a really good talker, really insightful, really smart. So we'll see. If he was tutored by N'Kobe, I got to guess that he's a pretty good player.
Yeah. And it points more to Jahad Campbell probably having this role as this hybrid linebacker edge rusher if they felt like they needed to get another guy in that room. I think Smile Monday, another reason they could have brought him in is if they do play Jahad Campbell in that role and they need that extra linebacker out in the field. I'm not sure as much as they do like Jeremiah Trotter, and I think Trotter was a really solid special teams player last year, and I think he's pretty solid against the run, or at least he was at Clemson. He's not the type of athlete that, Smile Munden is, and I don't know if he's the type of the athlete that can consistently cover tight ends and running backs in the NFL. And a big thing that Howie Roseman talked about this week is they need athletes. They need guys that can work out in space, and that's the knock on Jeremiah Trotter Jr., and that's the positive for Smile Munden. You might be trading off a little bit of the run defense eventually in the NFL because he's a small guy. I mean, at his size, I don't know if he can really, survive consistently on rundowns. Like 6'2", 224, according to ESPN's measurements, is extremely light. He moves like a safety, though. So I wonder if this guy is a sub-package coverage linebacker, another weapon for Vic Fangio to use. And even if he's not a full-time starter, right, he could be a really valuable piece. And Bob, you mentioned the N'Kobe D thing, him replacing him at Georgia as a starter eventually. I mean, I don't want to get too far ahead, but because of N'Kobe Dean's injury history, and I know how he talked about him the other day, we don't know how N'Kobe Dean's going to come back. We don't know what his future holds. So this is a potential insurance option, a guy that, who knows, with a year or two of development, could develop into a full-time starter. Their last 5th round pick, though, probably not as exciting as Smile Munden Jr. and some of these other guys because the pathway for him being a starter is really not there. But Drew Kendall, great bloodlines, center from Boston College. Where's he going to fit in here?
Well, I wouldn't say there's no path for him to start because he was a guard his whole life until he got to BC, and then they immediately said this yesterday. They immediately made him a center when he got to BC and became a 3-year starter. And just because Cam Jurgens is here doesn't mean he can't get into that guard competition at some point. It's all a matter of how he plays. He's certainly the Eagles have to have drafted the all great father team, great bloodline father team. His father Pete was a 1st round pick. What year was that? 1996. Of the Seahawks, played 13 years in the league. Miles Hinton's father was a 1st round pick, I think, of the Broncos in '83. So we got 2 guys on this staff, and he played 13 years, was a 7-time Pro Bowler. So the Eagles have the all-father team here. He was a left tackle early in his career, moved to right tackle most of his career. But getting back to your point about Drew Kendall, so I mean, yeah, there's a right guard opening right here, right now, and I don't know how the Eagles are viewing. We all think that Tyler Steen is the favorite to win this job because he's been here the longest. They've wanted him to win that job. I think they wanted him to win it last year, but he didn't. So he got hurt. Training camp, Mekhi Becton seized the role and turned it into a nice contract for him as a free agent. But to say that Drew Kendall has no chance, I don't believe that. But he also does. the Eagles have been they were so thin at center we saw last year that they had to take Landon Dickerson in a playoff game and start him at center again, not just a playoff game, the NFC Championship, because Cam Jurgens' back wouldn't allow him to go. So that's not ideal that you're moving one of your starters out of the position where he's a Pro Bowler. And now Drew Kendall is a true center. Howie Roseman mentioned this yesterday, and you saw that the backup has been Brett Toth here for a few years, and he struggles to snap the ball. And it's not like everybody thinks it's just something you can do. It's not that big a deal, but it can be a big deal if you got a guy who doesn't snap the ball well. So now they have assurance at center too.
Yeah, and we saw them try to do it last year with Dylan McMahon. McMahon was more undersized than Kendall was. They cut him at the end of training camp. They brought him back on the practice squad, but then the Rams signed him up to their active roster. Obviously, they didn't like McMahon enough in that role to keep him, but maybe they'll like Drew Kendall more for him to make the roster. He mentioned he played guard in high school, and so possibly Jeff Stoutland can get the most out of him there, and he could compete with Tyler Steen and Kenyon Green and Trevor Keegan, whoever they throw in there at right guard. But I also feel like that's a tough projection. But I don't mind the having the backup center, because you're right though. If they're in a situation where they're forced to put Landon Dickerson at center, this offensive line, I think, it could be in some big trouble, because you already have problems potentially at right guard. And then your left guard situation could get a little troublesome as well if Landon Dickerson has to go over to center. So I don't think it's a bad day 3 pick at all. I wonder, what his upside is. But after all, this is day 3. But the one pick that maybe has upside long term, not for the in terms of him becoming a starter or playing for the Eagles, or really having a big role, but for draft value for him and another player, is Kyle McCord. Bob, I know you wrote about him a couple of times this spring as a guy that the Eagles could maybe target. You saw the future, and I didn't really think he would get there in the 6th round. I thought he had a really good year at Syracuse, but he did fall. The Eagles obviously did their homework, and they take him in the 6th round. I don't know if he's going to be the next Tom Brady, but what's your opinion on Kyle McCord?
Yeah, well, I took him in 2 of my mock drafts. This guy who led the country in passing yards last year. Fascinating story in himself. And I'm partial to Jersey guys. I'm born and raised my whole life in Jersey. I work for NJ.com. And even though he played at St. Joe's Prep over in Philly, football powerhouse, he's from Mount Laurel. I know the area well enough to know that the midget team in Mount Laurel is Fleetwood, and I know guys who've played for that midget program. This guy, he was a player in college, and it's fascinating story, because he'd been the Ohio State quarterback. The last year they bring in Will Howard, who's a Downingtown kid, and tell McCord, gonna have to compete. He didn't want to have to compete for that job. He wanted to go play and make sure he was going to be able to play. And he goes to Syracuse, leads, I think, Syracuse to their 3rd double-digit win in school history, leads the country in passing yards. I think he threw 35, 30, maybe 37 touchdowns. I forget the total off the top of my head. But, just an exciting player. I love the local stories. And who knows what he can become. He comes here under zero pressure in terms of having to be a quarterback who makes it right away. Going to learn a great quarterback room, because I think Jalen Hurts is the ultimate pro. Obviously a Super Bowl champion who's been to 2 Super Bowls, but is ultra intense focused. And then you got Tanner McKee, who is proven also to be a great guy in that room, and I think maximized his potential from what he could have been at Stanford to now be the backup quarterback here. I'll be surprised if Kyle McCord is not QB3 instead of Dorian Thompson-Robinson when when the season starts. So obviously I like this pick a lot.
In an ideal world, I think the Eagles would love for Tanner McKee to continue to play well in the preseason this year. Maybe not trade him, this summer, but maybe next offseason. If he plays Week 17, has a good preseason, they can move on for him for a good, a good draft pick, maybe like a fourth or a fifth, and then Kyle McCord steps in, and then they could continue, this factory of developing quarterbacks and possibly flipping them for picks. It's a smart business strategy, and Kyle McCord is he's not just this guy that only has backup potential. A lot of guys really like him. ESPN's Matt Miller compares him to Derek Carr. I mean, he's got a big arm. He's a really good rhythm thrower as well. He went through a shaky time at Ohio State, but also shows you the guy has a good character. He didn't let that really knock him down. He went out in Syracuse and he balled out, and he ended up becoming a 6th-round pick, and a lot of people thought he was worthy of more. So it'll be interesting to see where Kyle McCord goes from here. I don't think this is good news for Dorian Thompson-Robinson. To me, more likely, probably just a camp arm at this point. I'm sure they liked him a decent bit coming out. That's why they traded for him, but I'm not sure really where this leaves Dorian Thompson-Robinson. But good for Kyle McCord. The local kid comes to Philadelphia. There's 2 offensive linemen in the 6th round. We could talk about them in the same pairing. Miles Hinton and Cameron Williams, both offensive tackles, both really big guys, both, different backgrounds though. Cameron Williams, really, really inexperienced, whereas Maya Hilton, has a little more experience. Bob, of these 2 offensive tackles, who has a better chance of sticking in the NFL, you think?
Offensive tackles are valuable pieces to any franchise, and not just the starters. Both of these guys have some experience. I think Williams is the one who played mostly at left tackles last year. Miles Hinton had a lot of experience. He's playing right tackle the year. Michigan won the national championship, then moved out to left tackle last year. Hinton's obviously got the better bloodlines, but one of these 2 guys is going to probably be the Fred Johnson on this team in 2025, where he's going to be asked to, because maybe they both make it, but where they're going to be asked to be the top fill-in tackle if either Jordan Mailata or Lane Johnson gets hurt. Jeff Stoutland has a lot to work with in training camp, and that's going to make him very happy. I don't know which one of these guys is going to be better. I'll be honest, I haven't watched film on them. Don't know that much about them beyond where they came from this year, but one of them is going to make this team and have a very important. The Fred Johnson role was very, very important last year because the Eagles lost Jordan Mailata for multiple games, and Lane Johnson is getting up there in years, so you never know, But these are important roles and they're important jobs.
I wouldn't count out Kendall Lamb, totally from winning that swing tackle job. They brought him in. He's got a ton of experience, starting experience, but there are other concerns about his back. He got back surgery after he played with the Dolphins last year. I read something that he put on Instagram basically saying that his back was numb. There's no guarantee that Kendall Lamb, although the more experienced option, probably the best case scenario is that you have a guy there who's done it before, but there is no guarantee that he is, coming back healthy and is going to be able to recover from that back surgery. So they add 2 young offensive tackles. Miles Hinton, a lot more experience than Cameron Williams, 31 starts in his career, played at Stanford before he was at Michigan. So from that perspective, he probably has the leg up because Cameron Williams is only a 1-year starter, and he is raw as you could be technique-wise. But there is something about, him being 6'6", 317. He's a moldable, ball of clay. I think Jeff Stoutland would love to work with him. I don't think he's going to be ready right away because of the technique problems. I think the biggest memory that people have in terms of him just being an inexperienced player who's just not really ready for the NFL is when Jack Sawyer beat him in the college football semifinal, got around him, forced a fumble, and that was it. Ohio State beat Texas in that game, and it takes more than one play, but it just showed that Cameron Williams, he's a flawed player, but he's got the physical tools you want. And back in November and December, when I was starting to read about the draft, this was a guy that people were talking about as a potential first-round pick. And now he's in the 6th round. So obviously people think he has the tools, but
the Miles Hinton genes also go beyond his father, because his mother it was one of the things I read about yesterday was interesting. His mother was a basketball player at Northwestern. The father, both Northwestern. She averaged 10 points a game in college at Northwestern, and there's also major intelligence. As we mentioned, he started his career at Stanford. His mother, after graduating as a basketball player at Northwestern, went to Notre Dame and got a law degree. So he's a combination of smart and with great athletic genes. So I would probably put my money on him. But hey, this you can't teach what Cameron Williams has in terms of just huge size. I'm laughing because you try to look up these guys as you're talking about them, and this is a great misprint on college football reference.com. Two things that as I'm trying to look him up. One is that there were 4 guys in the college football last year named Cameron Williams playing in college football last year. The other is they list this Cameron Williams at 5'10" and 178 pounds, and he's going to be the smallest tackle in the history of the NFL, if that's true.
Yeah. Good thing. I don't think Jeff Stoutland would be wanting a 5'10" tackle.
Even Jeff Stoutland's not going to turn that into an NFL tackle.
No, he definitely won't. But I might have undersold. We're speaking of looking up, heights and weights, and like Miles Hinton is 6'7", 323 pounds as well, and he might be a little more polished. So
he's a big man.
Yes, and probably the safer bet because of the experience. Bob, I'm getting. We're gonna wrap this up. With the 6th round, the last pick here. What are your guys as well? I know you got excited looking at him up yesterday. Antoine Powell Ryland, super small for being an edge rusher, only 6'3". There's outliers, and he's one of them. But super productive, like you mentioned earlier in this podcast. What's the chances a guy like this, although he's undersized, carves out a role for this Eagles defense?
Yeah, I mean, he's another guy who started elsewhere and finished up at Virginia Tech. 17 sacks, 25 and a half in his last 2 years. He's one of he joined Bruce Smith, pretty big name there, as the only Virginia Tech player to have multiple 4 sacks games in his career. I believe he had 3 of them. The thing I like is, the game's about production. It's you can be as big as you want, or as small as you want, or as fast as you want, or as slow as you want. It's all about production, and I like when guys have put up big numbers, and it's not like Virginia Tech they play in the ACC, so he was doing something right. And hey, it's your last pick in the draft. It was a 6th rounder, not a 7th rounder, but you can't argue with that. You bring him in, and you see if he can rush the passer. Even if he is undersized, you give him a chance to prove that he can rush the passer at 6'3", 250. And the guy who comes to mind for me in the years covering football, that everybody when they drafted him as a 5th rounder, like he's just not really big enough, and this is going back, so guys maybe weren't even as big, but Trent Cole wasn't that big a guy. But you know what Trent Cole could do? He could rush the passer. So I don't know, if I'm not saying this guy's going to be Trent Cole, but hey, you know what? He's got a chance. He's got a uniform now. He's got a chance.
Yeah, he does, and I think this is a perfect dart throw in the 6th round. More than likely, because of the size, he might not pan out, but I wouldn't bet against it, because yes, the size, is pretty bad. It doesn't really; those guys just don't typically survive at edge rusher. But overall, he's a really good athlete. His RAS score, which is a relative athletic score, is a 9.1 or 9.18, which is really incredible. So he's an incredible athlete. He has a great 40-yard dash time, 4.69. 20-yard split is 2.72, and a 10-yard split is 1.63, which are all great scores. He tested well in explosive stuff for the vertical and the broad jump as well. He jumped over 10 inches in the broad jump. So he is small, but he is athletic, and on film when I watched him a few times, he has a nasty spin move. He has some really good athletic burst. Like if he can overcome this, his size, I wouldn't be surprised if he's a solid designated pass rusher type for the Eagles, giving them another depth option. We've covered all the picks now, though, Bob. We've gone over every single prospect. Just want to get your final thoughts on what this draft class means. What were your takeaways and from just the 10 guys they drafted, and what do you think it means going forward?
Yeah, well, Howie Roseman said many times, and after the first day, after the second day, and again yesterday, he never wants to be drafted for positional need, and I think to a great extent he didn't do that here. I mean, I don't think he hinted that hey, we felt like there was a chance that Campbell might fall in this draft in the days leading up to the first round. But I don't think that was plan A when they sat down and the draft started at 8:00 on Thursday night. And eventually saw, hey, they had their board. This guy's really high on our board. And I got to imagine that how he was going, let's get this guy. Let's get this guy. That's why he's trying to trade up to 22 with the Chargers, because he's getting excited about a guy who they didn't think would fall that far. And they don't need a linebacker. They didn't need a linebacker, even if you are worried about Nakobe Dean. And I think the board pretty much went that way all the way along for the Eagles. The interesting thing to me were the trade outs, because there were a few times where I thought, hey, you can take a lineman here, or this guy might be better there. But they felt like they could get the guys that they valued and pick up some picks, and maybe it's almost getting instead of having one lottery ticket, you got two or three. So they moved down a few times and still got guys that they really valued. And you never two things. One is, as I wrote yesterday when I did my grades, these are way too early grades that aren't fair. It's like you walk into class and the teacher looks at you and they start giving you grades. And in this case, you don't even walk into class. Some of these guys have probably never even been to Philadelphia. But I think that when I started, when you look at Howie's track record, it's impossible to not say, okay, this guy didn't have a good draft, given what he's done the last 5-6 years to build this into a perennial Super Bowl contender. And B, when you start reading, the national guys, they're all kind of in line with what you think. They got a lot of value out of guys in later rounds. He picked 8 guys. He only had 2 picks after 2 days, and then he added 8 on the final day and got a lot of value from the 4th round on out of this draft. I think it was a good draft. I gave him on my grades, my way too early grades. I gave him an A overall. We'll see what happens in future years, but his drafts have been home runs lately, and so we'll see if we hit another one.
Yeah, I do think that's fair. I wonder if they are a little regretful that they didn't land an interior offensive lineman, another option to compete with Tyler Steen, and more of a guard tackle type. Same with tight end, but they filled a lot of needs overall. They got a lot of good players that we're not expected to be there. Like Jahad Campbell wasn't expected to be there. I know some people thought Ty Robinson was a third round type of player. I mentioned Cameron Williams having probably like first, second round type tools, but needs a lot of development. So overall, their process was sound. They took a lot of guys with high upside, like Campbell and Cameron Williams, and uh, the list goes on. They had a lot of high upside guys, but I also think they got a lot of um, surefire, cerebral type players that you think can make an instant impact right away, like Makuba, who probably does have upside as well. PFF compares him to Devin McCourty, but that's a guy that you feel like what you're getting as well. So it was a good combination, and I agree with you, Bob. If I had to give an Eagles an early grade, it would probably be an A. But that's all the time that we have for today. Thank you for everyone for tuning in and listening. Make sure you read our Eagles content at NJ.com. We'll have more stuff on the draft and rookie minicamp and OTAs and minicamp, and then going into the summer. We'll have you all covered coming up soon. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.